WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We have been angling around sports and doing a lot with the Maryland Hospital Association as we're all waiting for vaccines. My wife's getting her vaccine this week. Don Mohler, my sometimes cohort around here, got his shots taken care of recently as well. And in this 2021 season, we've decided to add a weekly segment that just Don and I do. We really haven't done much of this since the sports huddles back when he was running accounting with Kevin Kamenetz. But it's a free-form segment that we have dubbed the Recon. So I welcome you in for the, what they used to say, the week that was. How about the week ahead? And Don Mohler joining us here from the 21228. What's going on, man? We're closer to baseball season. I figured you'd be like watching the Orioles on mass. Oh, that's right. They're not on anymore. So you.
Well, we can start. You know what? This is one of those rare times that you and I are going to agree on the Orioles, because from a marketing point of view, Nestor, excuse me, I cannot understand how it wasn't in their interest recently to show Trey Mancini's first baseball activity since he was diagnosed with colon cancer.
Do you think putting on baseball in the middle of plague where everybody's home on a cold day, on a Sunday, in the beginning of, late February, let's say, that would be a good thing to promote their baseball team? Well, I've been saying that since they got the network, and since they've gotten the network, since they've gotten the team, the bare minimum has been really a standard operating procedure for them. It really has been.
Well, I'm very fond of Mike Elias and Sigmundal and the whole group out there. I think they're on the right path. I think we're going to be very good in the not too distant future, and I don't think Mike Elias has made many missteps. I actually look forward to chatting with Mike on that, because I thought I think it is a missed opportunity, Nestor, when we're trying to rebuild, and I would hope that would be part of the rebuilding process. I actually, if they didn't want to pay, and I don't know all the union rules, they may not be able to do what I'm suggesting, but it would seem to me that it would have been a neat thing even to partner with colleges throughout the state and their communication majors, and to fly, let's just pick 10 games, 10 spring training games, and fly a couple of the young men and women who are majoring in communications around in our colleges down to Florida to do some
pay
games.
People? How about they're a company. They've been doing $200 million a year. How about they just pay Gary Thorne to do it?
Well, I'd be okay with that too, but I did like the sort of internship thing to at least get the games on. No, listen, I think they should pay folks to broadcast the games, because I think it's just, to me,
we're paying for it.
A marketing.
We're paying for the network ostensibly to have the Oriole games. There's nothing else about that network. Nationals games, if you're of that ilk, but there's nothing about that network. I mean, Don, it's indefensible. I mean, I know you're going to try to defend it, but it's indefensible.
No, wait, you missed. Don't stop now. Stop. Don't put words in my mouth. I said this is one of the few times that you and I agree on the Orioles. I think it was a misstep on the Orioles' part.
But this is the way they've been doing it for 15 years.
Well, I'm not worried about how they did it back in the dark ages.
It's nothing different.
I think it is. That's where you and I do disagree. I think every step that Mike Elias and his team have made so far has been a step in the right direction. I think the product on the field is going to reflect that in the very near future. I think you see it in the development of our farm prospects. It's one of the reasons why I'm frustrated, because I think they have good storylines coming out of Florida. And you're right, when it's cold and nasty as it was on that day that Trey Mancini came up in the first inning and got a standing ovation and got a single, it was a nasty day in Baltimore that day. And boy, it would have been great to sit in front of a fire, pour a little scotch or a little bourbon or a little natty bow and watch some spring training baseball. So, yes, I hope the Orioles and Masson will come to rethink that and give folks some baseball here in the spring to get us ready as we go forward. So
I am fatigued of being a guy who cares more about the baseball team than they care about themselves. That has, as an effort over 30 years, fatigued me
well,
to the
again,
point that I'm now talking politics with you, and
yeah.
I prefer it.
Well, I think they care very much about the product on the field. I think they're working very hard to get that right. My guess is unless there's some kind of miracle that I don't foresee, we're going to be very bad again, and that's okay. I can go for 1 or maybe 2 more years of being very bad if that means we're going to be good for a long time. But if we're very
And you're getting
bad
older.
again,
I mean, the fact that you
I
have this
know.
patience.
I got to see another. I have to see another. Listen, I want to go to a World Series with my grandsons. I got 3 grandsons who are big-time O's fans. They love the Orioles. They love baseball. And, yeah, that's right. So Mike Elias and guys out there, and, again, I think Mike's done a terrific job. Let's get this thing turned around so I can see some playoff baseball with my grandsons. But, boy, Nestor, what a week. I mean, I'm telling you, like you said, since we started this Recon, you mentioned it. It's like current events. Your head is spinning. I mean, the world. You can't keep track of what is happening in a 24-hour cycle. You know, as a former
The
educator,
insurrection wasn't even 60 days ago, and they've already let the guy off the hook. Like, it's like it didn't happen. And when this stuff happens, all I think about is this police officer and all of those police officers that were down there trying to protect these people's lives. And it's like those people, it's like it never happened. It's like we're trying to, like, pretend that January 6th didn't happen. I'm never going to let that happen.
Well, there's certainly – that's part of the plan for the Trump party, or as we call him, the former guy party. I mean, I think Don Jr., when he referred to whatever this clown show was that took place in Orlando as T-PAC as opposed to CPAC, you know, that was absolutely true. It's now this group of people. I tried to equate it. Max Weiss put something on Twitter, and I responded to her Twitter. I tried not. I didn't watch. I'll say out of the whole weekend, I didn't watch 10 minutes when it was on. So I caught a glimpse of crazy Ted Cruz and a glimpse of Josh Hawley and 2 minutes of the president's medal. I watched them take a golden idol, right? A golden statue,
Made in China, by the way.
Big golden statue with this funky looking orange hair, and roll it down and people sort of hugging it. And I thought, yeah, it reminded me, Nestor. I think what, somebody referred to it as Fat Elvis. To me, it was even sadder than that. You're not old enough yet to have this experience. You will one day. But every now and then, clicking the dial, there'll be a reunion show on PBS. And it'll be some group from back in the late 50s or the early 60s.
I know what you're talking about. I know where you're going with this.
Some doo-wop show, and I'll say, oh, man, that was my first slow dance at CYO, or, boy, I remember going to MYF or the Teen Center, and you work up the nerve to go across the room and ask the little girl with the curls if she would like to slow dance. And boy, here was this great song. And, look at that. They're going to be playing it again. And you turn on the special, and the poor guys are 50, 60 pounds overweight. They got bad toupees. They really can't sing anymore. And a bunch of people on life support are sort of clapping in the audience. And I go, I just want to go curl up in a corner. And I
want to be young again, is what
I want to be young again. Exactly. And I thought, that is really what we had. We had this, disgraced, probably the former guy who's probably going to jail like Al Capone did, right, over tax evasion. But we have him there. We got the My Pillow guy running around in the audience. You got these crazy Nestor, you and I recently.
I used to use Goya products, by the way. I used Mojo.
So much for Goya, so much for the pillow guy, all that stuff. But you know what, Nestor? If people have not listened, I really do encourage them to jump out to Baltimore Positive and listen to the interviews we've done with the healthcare heroes. Thanks to our friends at the Maryland Hospital Association, our friends at KO Public Affairs for setting all that up. But weren't you struck? And it's funny, I didn't know the reaction we were going to get, Nestor, and we asked 4 or 5 of them and got the same reaction. We said, what did it feel like to you as you went in there every day for the past year and watched people suffer and watched people die without their loved ones and have to communicate with loved ones who were in the parking lot in lawn chairs, as some of them described to us, and who have had millions of people say, don't wear a mask, and millions of people say, this isn't real, it's a hoax. And I don't know about you, Nestor, I was struck by the absolute pain that showed up on their face when we
Well, I
asked
mean,
that
I
question.
went to North Carolina last June, and I'll never forget it, right? I remember, I went to Nag's Head to get away from people, right? It's why you go to Nag's Head. And, I mean, we were 3.5 months, 4 months into the pandemic at that point, and seeing people freely just not wearing masks anywhere and not demanding it anywhere. And I was struck by that and thought, what that healthcare system would look like. And this was at a time when, Trump was still calling this a blue state disease because it was happening in Washington and in New York, right? Where the death rates were up and the hospitalizations, and there was a freak out everywhere. The first places to really shut down. And, since I've been back in June here in Maryland, I've been 2 other places since June, right? The mask thing, I was at a Walmart a month ago, and I saw a kid on your side of town. I was going over there picking some stuff up I could only get there. Like the only time I've been in a Walmart in the last year, honestly. I did see one kid rolling through without a mask and just basically being a jackass, 17-year-old kid, And it's the only person I've seen. I mean, the only time I've been out, everywhere I've been, every state fair, every sponsor, the mall, Wise Markets, bunches of those, supermarkets, everywhere I've been, I've not seen anyone break the rule anywhere I've personally been.
No doubt. I think the same thing. I go to the grocery store and everyone's masked up. It's
Well,
not
we're
an
all still
issue,
alive, and the hospitals aren't overcrowded, right?
and
Like we've been pretty vigilant. We've done a pretty good job here, this state.
Oh, I think Maryland has done an excellent job. And again, I was just struck that one of our guests said, I want to grab them. I mean, this was a delightful woman, was a vice president, for crying out loud, of a major hospital system. She said, I want to grab them by their shirt and pull them in and say, look at what we're looking at. They were angry. And again, I think about,
I was angry every night last spring and summer as I'm hearing inject yourself with bleach. I mean, and to think that kind of leadership could come back with gerrymandering and the Ron Johnsons and I mean, it's a little frightening on the outside of this CPAC to see where we've been, right, the last 4 years, and to exhale and to think there's no chance of that coming back, right? Like in the same way that when Hillary went in and we just thought she was going to win, there's no chance that's good. After seeing that for 4 years, there's no chance that can come back. And then I see how these states are being run.
Yeah, I think it's
2 weeks ago.
I think that's a reach. I think your question is a good one. Is there a chance that it can come back? Certainly it can, because of the tribal nation, the tribal state of our national political scene right now. My political gut and my years of political experience tell me that it will be much more difficult for the party of Fat Elvis to come back, because beyond the hate and the vitriol and the lies and the rejection of science and the rejection of democracy, if that weren't enough, there also, if you pay close attention, Nestor, there's no policy attached to the current Trump party. There's no policy. There's nothing that someone would listen to beyond the anger of you're black or brown and we don't like you, beyond that kind of we hate them, there's nothing there. So my gut tells me that the base for that gets smaller and smaller. But as you allude to, and rightfully so, Nestor, the efforts at voter suppression across the country have never been greater. And to the point where I applaud once again Stacey Abrams, who evidently now is going to shift her focus to fight these efforts nationwide, because it is remarkable when you think about it that there is a political party right now, one of the two major political parties, that is dedicated to doing everything it can to make sure that people can't vote. I mean,
have a question about
strange.
this. And I was going to, you and I, this is why we do the recon, because I can get a little salty and get out of line a little bit. Last week, I was thinking about this when the voter suppression part came up in regard to Georgia and other places. And I literally turned to my wife and I said, no offense, but if you're a white person in Georgia that is politically motivated in any way, right? I mean, and that can be Confederate flag, KKK racist, or just a Mitt Romney centrist Republican banker who lives in Alpharetta, right? Wherever that is, the notion that you're going to find new voters, new angry white voters, like let's just call it what it is, traditional Republican, whatever that is, whether it's in Middle River or whether it's on the Eastern Shore, I'm wondering in 2021 how many devotees of the Lauren Boebert types have been unmined. You know what I mean? Like that's an interesting part to me, to find the non-voting white voter who joins that team who isn't already on the team, right?
Well,
like,
when Fat Elvis, take your point, Nestor. It's an excellent point. When Fat Elvis took the stage at the carnival, recently,
with a swastika as a stage symbol, literally, right? Like literally.
Well, I didn't see that. Now you're breaking news.
Go check that out.
Go
check out the styling of the stage.
Pull that up.
That was fascinating.
I tend to avoid Nazi references, but I will go.
Go check it out.
I will go look that up. But
look
I was thinking as he attacked Liz Cheney, and again, Liz Cheney and I probably disagree, as do Mitt Romney and I, as do Ben Sass and I, on almost every issue. But we don't disagree that there are facts and truth, and that democracy is better than autocracy. We don't disagree on those things. So the president comes out and calls out, Fat Elvis comes out and calls out 10 or 11 Republicans who he's got in his sights now. And he's going to do everything that he can to defeat in their primaries. My thought is
that's all he does is cruelty, right? I mean, that's literally.
But it's not. I don't think that ends well, and here's why. If that means that these folks are not to the right of center enough, then that means whoever beats them, and if you're right, if there are enough voters in Republican primaries, and there may well be, to support the Boeberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greens, and that whole the
and
Matt
hopefully
Gaetzes,
not Andy Harris,
the Matt Gaetzes, and those people. We'll have to look at Andy's district lines, and we wish Heather Mazur all the best as she tries to take that on.
A great conversation with her last week, by the way.
We did, but if there are enough of the what I'll call the Looney Tune conference to elect these far right fringe candidates, I don't believe, other than in a very few districts that are really drawn in a perverse way, that's the recipe to win general elections. I mean, people lose sight of the fact, Nestor. Republicans have lost 7 out of the last 8. Think about that for a minute. 7 out of the last 8 popular votes in the presidential election. Republicans have lost because they've been intent on shrinking that tent. And when we thought there might be an autopsy of the party after this past election, there has been no autopsy. If anything, while people would probably prefer that Fat Elvis sort of drift away, they don't want his voters to drift away.
Well, it's
and
fascinating what the Kinslingers have, the stance they've taken out, that they are divorced from that. There are many Republicans that have said that I'm not going to do that. I don't know what that drives a three-party system in our country, right? That's a much larger conversation. But the Adam Kinslinger, the sane side of the right aisle, really wants nothing to do with this. And probably deep down, Mitch McConnell knows this is a losing recipe, but he's too old to really care.
I think he does. Yeah.
And Lindsey Graham, too. If you're over 70, you just want to be holding your seat right now.
Well, I think they're similar and they're dissimilar. Mitch, I worry Mitch must be on some kind of meds, because you can't give the speech that Mitch McConnell gave right at the end of the impeachment trial, which basically indicted the Fat Elvis and said that the only reason he didn't vote to convict Fat Elvis was he didn't think it was constitutional. I think it was a bogus argument. But he then, in Perry Mason-like fashion, went down and just simply excoriated Fat Elvis and took him to task and called him un-American, every name in the book. And then a week or so later, when asked on Fox News if he would support Fat Elvis again if he won the nomination, Mitch says, "Oh, of course." And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, you just said the guy was an insurrectionist. You just said he tried to overthrow the government of the United States. And you say, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll vote for him." That I think nauseates people. But listen, here's the bottom line, Nestor. My team, Democrats, they can't take this stuff for granted. They've got to govern. They better understand that we're still a divided country, but they better get things done.
Well, 2.3 million shots in a day last week is, my wife's got an appointment this week. You've got a shot in your arm, right? So that, and then the economy, right? And the stimulus and the PPP, and we're all feeding ourselves that this time next year, if we're in a place where you and Jeff are going to Terps games, right? And you could get on an airplane and go to spring training this time next year, and you're planning a beach trip or maybe a trip over to Paris with your wife because you could. Maybe Paris is different because that's a different society, different culture. But here in America, if we can get this together in the next 24 months, this would bode well for governance in this country over the next decade, so that we don't go back to the people who think it's cool to build a stage out of a Nazi swastika.
Well, I've said it, ad nauseum. I've written about it ad nauseum. There is not an issue that the Democrats support that doesn't have broad support among the American people. It gets hung up. We've accepted for the past 20 or 25 years that government shouldn't work because of an arcane feature of the Senate called the filibuster. And the filibuster has created this environment where unless you get 60 votes, you can't pass any legislation. So it seems to me that it's incumbent upon the Democrats in the United States Senate. It's going to be a challenge because Kristen Sinema from Arizona and Joe Manchin from West Virginia are not there yet. But in order to govern, you're going to have to get rid of the filibuster. And what people will say is the danger in that is you will feel like your neck's on a swivel as a citizen of the United States, because next time the Republicans take back the Senate, which they will at some point, then the Democrats will always be changing course. And my response to that is that's better than doing nothing. I mean, the American people don't care how the sausage gets made. They want relief. They want the Recovery Act to be passed. They know that we've got to invest in infrastructure. You've been to Europe, Nestor. You've been around the world. You see what they're doing in terms of bridges and trains
I'm just
and
seeing potholes in
highways.
Baltimore. I mean, just in our city, driving around, it's unacceptable.
Right.
It's
We've got to
be made
invest.
better.
We've got to invest in our infrastructure. So there's a lot going on. And you know, the other thing, I just want to jump to one local issue as well as we work our way through some of the craziness that's taking place. We mentioned to some of our guests from the healthcare world, I was really disappointed, Nestor, the educator came out in me, that we're sending kids back to school. We're going to send teachers back to work. And anybody who thinks teachers don't want to go back to work, you just don't have a clue. Please turn on something other than Newsmax, because teachers care deeply about their children. They've done amazingly heroic work over the past year. So please don't buy
And
into
the
this
jobs are
narrative.
tough already.
Oh, my God, they've done an incredible job. So we're sending them all back. And, you know, it's going to be, you know, some of the students are going back in March, hopefully more by April and May. But we're going to send them back. And the first thing that state superintendent and the state board did was say, yeah, and we're going to go forward with high stakes testing. So kids who haven't been in a classroom for a year, we're going to send them back. We're going to sit them down and have them take hours and hours of tests. And you know, you've been on here with our good friend Cheryl Boast and me. Cheryl and I don't always see eye to eye on high stakes testing, although I think we're closer than people would think. I'm a supporter of testing students to see where they are so we can compare and make sure that your academic growth is commensurate with where they should be, and we should be able to compare communities and hold everyone accountable, but not this year. I mean, sometimes this is where I think the public.
See, I disagree with you just on the basis of trying to figure out where people are. I mean, I know these numbers get held in a high esteem and lots of decisions and money and resources get dedicated to it. But I think you need to figure out where all these kids are after a year of whatever this has been. You might
Nestor,
want to know that about your own grandkids.
Oh, no,
Don.
no. It's a great point, Nestor. And I love this discussion. Yes, 100%. And I've spoken to some educators recently who agree with that. They ought to
Some
be
kids might have forgotten how to read and write. Maybe.
They ought to be doing all kinds of assessments, formative assessments. There's two kinds of assessments: formative assessments, summative assessments. And they ought to be doing all kinds of assessments to identify where our young people are right now. But it ought not to be under the glaring lights of high stakes testing that's going to, shine a light on which school's doing better. That's not the year for that. But we ought to be doing exactly what you're suggesting, which is spending a lot of time doing assessments of our children. Where are they with their reading skills? Where are they with their
there's a new
computational
baseline
skills?
in March of 2021.
Correct.
It's a different place than it was in March of 2020. And we talked about the inequities of all, how different this was going to be for poor and rich, black and white, urban and rural, all the way along, right?
And a flash, every teacher will tell you they don't need a test to tell you that on a socioeconomic scale, the students in the middle to upper income families continue to progress at a pretty acceptable pace, and that those in lower socioeconomic households who didn't have the same resources probably regressed. That's the issue, the equity issue, how we address it, how we get those children the help that they need so that we can get everybody back on track. Because as you said, Nestor, this year's test has no relevance at all to last year's test because the instruction has not looked the same. And what's getting lost in this, I don't think folks understand how personal and how stressed teachers are in the face of these assessments. They've been through enough in this year. They've been through enough to say to them, don't worry, we're not going to have a state testing program, but we're going to ask each local LEA, each local school district to make sure that teachers are analyzing and assessing where their children are so that we do have a baseline when we move forward. That seems to me to be common sense, and I think that's what moms and dads would support, And it's just sometimes I think we need to just think like common folk. I often quote one of my buddies. I've said it a million times, right? One of my buddies in my doctoral cohort was a superintendent from Virginia. He used to say, Don, problem with common sense just ain't very common. And I always said, I always gave him credit, always give him credit. It was his saying. I thought, man, isn't that the truth? Problem with common sense is it just ain't very common. I thought nothing could be truer. So that's sort of my rant for this week.
Don Mohler joining us here on the Recon. We have been doing this last couple of weeks. We're going to continue just once a week, getting together, chewing the fat a little bit about baseball, politics, sports, life in Baltimore, maybe crab cakes before it's all over with. Big shout out to our friends at Fadley's. I am getting up with Amy this week. I'm talking crab cakes with her. I'm going to be talking with Evan. I had him on the program last week talking about tamales and crab cakes and other stuff as well. We're going to be ramping up and gearing up as we get these shots and get out a little bit to make our mark here at Baltimore Positive. We appreciate you following along and follow along with Don and I out at BaltimorePositive.com.